episode 129 of the Silver Lining for Learning Vodcast. My name is Tara Jones. This evening, we will be discussing the topic of technology, education, and accountability. I will be serving as your moderator for this evening. I work for Baltimore County Public Schools as a vocal music teacher, and this is my 24th year with Baltimore County. I am very fortunate to be joined by my two co-hosts this evening, Rachel and Allie. Hello, ladies. Glad to be with you tonight.
Hey.
Hello, Sarah. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, super excited. So I'm Alice Kane, and I work at Patapsco High School, and I teach special education self-contained science courses. And I've been teaching for about 7 years.
Nice. All right, and I am Rachel Circus. I am a Baltimore County Public School teacher. I have been teaching for 4 years now, 3 of which have been in first grade, and I recently did 1 year in kindergarten.
Thanks, ladies. And we are very excited to share with you our special guest, Dr. Kelly Keene. She is a senior lecturer and director of educational technology at Loyola University in Baltimore, Maryland. Welcome, Kelly. We're so glad you're here with us.
Thanks for having me, ladies. I'm impressed with the amount of experience that you're bringing to the table, too. My background is really in elementary education. I was a teacher in K through 5, a couple different grade levels for 5 years, and the last 15-ish years I've been working in higher ed at all different levels, but really focused on technology the whole time. I mean, all the way back to the time when teaching kids how to create PowerPoint slides was considered very novel. So that just gives you a little understanding of sort of where I've come from and how tech has changed in the last 10 to 15 years. But I'm excited to be here tonight to talk about this.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, our first topic for tonight relating to equity. And as I stated before, our focus tonight is going to be on accountability. So what technology equity issues have been exacerbated by the pandemic? We definitely find ourselves in a unique season in education, and each one of us representing our schools and our families and our circumstances can certainly speak to this topic. Would anyone like to start the conversation? Kelly, maybe you could share your thoughts about this question.
Absolutely. So, I think that there's a lot of different related issues that we could talk about. I'll do a quick kind of list through some of them, and then we can kind of pull out the ones you want to spend more time talking about. In terms of what has really been exacerbated, I think we saw access issues across all different schools, all different areas, access to Wi-Fi in particular, but also lack of devices or even access to devices. I think those were both surfaced right away when the pandemic hit and we were moving everything online quickly. I saw a real lack of consistency in terms of what was happening.
I'm recording.
At several different levels in the hierarchy, but I think the students were really most affected by that. Just in terms of what their day-to-day kind of looked like and how that changes, how it sort of changed. And then I think, the issues surrounding kind of teacher professional development, teacher training, teacher support, all of that surfaced as well. And I think those also are kind of reflected back on this idea of tech equity. My summer was spent doing a lot of professional development training and one-on-one assistance with a lot of faculty at Loyola who was kind of going through the same thing, which was this emergency shift to online learning. And it really was, a whirlwind for me to kind of try to answer and troubleshoot all these different issues. So I guess I'm interested in sort of hearing what you thought some of the issues were as well, and then maybe we could even break down a little further into those.
I really feel like I'll just jump in. I really feel like in regarding the training and the professional development, didn't you feel like, well, at least in my opinion, the training that was given was not at all on par with what needed to be given? Like, it was very surface level. There was no, what you were talking about, Kelly, which was some people were on the level of they needed one-on-one assistance to set up their teacher accounts online, to figure out how they were going to plan out their lessons, to make a full semester instead of a full year. Like, that was a huge change as well. And it just felt like the professional development wasn't at all equitable. And we weren't holding, our schools accountable for that, I think Tara said something about how all of the TIC liaisons were let go last year and how that was such poor timing. Just because, in this graduate program, we're learning how to do that properly. So it's so frustrating. You know what I mean? When you do it well and you know what you're doing, and then you see all these other people just like posting on Facebook how they're crying themselves to sleep at night. Like, oh, it's terrible.
Yeah, and go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, I feel like with technology, it's one of the things where we often hear this phrase, we're building the plane while we're flying the plane, which that's always a very frustrating thing. I don't feel like that's really something I should pat myself on the back about, because I feel like if you're building an excellent plane, please do it on the ground. But I also recognize that we are in a very unique situation. Nobody's been in it before. We're fortunate to have the technology we have, because how would we have ever done this 20 years ago? I think about when I started teaching, what would this have looked like? I'm thinking we probably would have been back to school a lot sooner, honestly, because there wouldn't really have been much of a way to deliver instruction except here are some worksheets and workbooks, that we can send home. But yeah, I feel like it caught everybody by surprise for sure. And I guess I feel frustrated as well, Allie. I completely agree with you, but there is part of me that says I need to give some grace because nobody really saw this coming. What do you think, Rachel?
Well, I was thinking about how when this all first started, which, it's hard to believe was all the way back in March. I mean, in a couple more months, we'll be up on a year's time of, watching Governor Hogan on our Promethean boards in our classroom announce that, 2 weeks of closing schools, which became 2 more weeks, and I agree with what Allie was saying too about the professional development that we were given as far as trying to prepare us to teach online was nowhere where it needed to be. And I even with being in this program, yes, we do have an advantage of having kind of those little checks in the back of our pocket, so to speak, where we can pull them out where needed. But so many teachers were asked to become these tech liaisons pretty much overnight and figure out how to do things. And personally, I just feel like from the higher ups, the amount of pressure that was put on expecting teachers overnight to become tech masters, I think that really still sits sour with me. I don't know about you all if you feel that way too, that it's like you said, Terry, building the plane while it's still flying. Yeah. There's still so much that we need to figure out, and I just feel like, again, the support isn't really there. It's getting better, much better than where it was.
Right.
But I still feel like it's being kind of, pushed at us so much where if there is a problem, we'll figure it out. You're on your own kind of thing.
It has been pushed, but don't you think that it also, to flip that, it does make us all quite accountable for having to learn what we should have been learning years before, and kind of almost pushing us off the cliff, like you're saying, but just making us accountable for this new technology that has been, to be honest, thrown at us. But I mean, what can we do? We have to rise to the occasion because the students deserve it. You know what I mean? They need it.
Well, it definitely feels like we've gone to war with a volunteer army. Instead of being well-equipped with the right equipment, with the right training, it's definitely been, put your boots on, grab your farming equipment, whatever you need, and try to really draw from the knowledge base that people, like you said, Allie, whatever you came with is what you had to work with, and, jumping to those administrators in our buildings, kind of moving away from the Baltimore County or the school system and moving down one level to our administrators. And maybe you can speak to this too, Kelly. I assume, hopefully not incorrectly, that you do maybe sometimes help with policy issues or decisions at Loyola, since you're director of a program? I mean, I'm sure this caught you at the collegiate level just as surprised as it did for us. So looking at someone who's in an administrative position, how did you look at policy change, and, what did it look like from your vantage point?
Well, I think that's an interesting way to phrase it. From my vantage point, I think it looked a little bit different because I was trying to keep the perspective of, an administrator of a program, but also someone who is in touch with teachers who are currently practicing in the classroom with feet on the ground. And so, in terms of policies at Loyola, it was an emergency situation. And what we initially did, I think we should also clarify this a little bit, is that in March, when Rachel was saying first week's closed for 2 weeks and then it extended, what we did in that time period was actually really not online learning and online teaching. It was an emergency remote learning situation where we were forced to go online, and teachers,
yes, that is exactly right. Yes,
like I was saying, it was thrown together, but that was really the result of a crisis situation versus what's happening now, which has changed a little bit and is now, I would hope to be more positive and say, this is more thoughtful online learning, that we've had a chance now to scale a little bit and to make a little bit more user-friendly for those students. But backing up to what, we were talking about, the policies and how to get them in place, I think we needed to put policies in place immediately with also the student perspective in mind. How are we going to still continue to serve students at higher ed level? There's a lot of the reasons students love higher ed is because they're on a campus living with their friends and engaged in campus life, and it looks very different when all of a sudden you pull that out of it and you're left with just online and higher ed. And so I think a lot of the kind of conversations we had and the training we did was, how do you engage students? How do you build a sense of community online? And particularly when you have, a group that's used to seeing each other face to face, or a group of, first years who've never met starting this fall, how do you build that online community? And so a lot of what we focused on was, how do we handle this emergency situation that's happening right now versus what kind of planning can we do over the summer to ensure that everyone is getting the training that they need and designing the classes the way they need to, what kind of planning and implementation needs to happen so that we can, in the fall, kind of roll out something that's a little bit more professional. And I do think that was sort of a hurdle that everybody, including the public schools and K-12 levels, went through, which was emergency remote shift because of a crisis to now we have some time and we need to be a little bit more thoughtful about this.
Right.
It makes me think about how many times in the school system that, in your building you have the emergency plans for a fire drill, or you have, what if I need an emergency sub-plan or things like that. You never would have thought that, okay, well, what are we going to do if I have an emergency pandemic?
Right. And I think Allie brought up some good points related to preparedness, because the reality is we have had tools that we could access. We have had training that we could access, but, whether it's an administrator or a classroom teacher or, or even, dare I say, even a parent, have you taken advantage of those opportunities? And then if not, how much, like Kelly, I think you said, how much did you then have to rely on other people to kind of share in that emergency situation with you? Allie, I think you were talking a little bit about that before we started tonight, about the support you offered to your colleagues at the high school level.
Yeah. You just feel so terrible for these teachers, and I think that there are layers of it as well, though, because it was the beginning, like this is about to happen this year, fully online, doing your own lessons, creating it. That was the anxiety, and then it was the, okay, we're starting it and learning anxiety, and then